a large extent the SNP is the more effective opposition because it's coherent, focused, motivated, understands the issues, and has got a specific way of looking at anti-austerity that clearly allows them to debate back against the Tory government in a way that Labour really hasn't figured out exactly where it stands in a lot of issues. So I think a lot of people in the media and round about Westminster understand and perceive the SNP, frankly, at the moment as being the main credible opposition.
But it's still very difficult for them to stop the Tories on matters that affect only Scotland, although there's the new evil plans. But, you know, even on purely Scottish matters, the one Conservative MP can block the rest of the SNP MPs. It's a situation that leads to an independence conclusion, I hope.
I think it does. People look at that and it's increasingly untenable over time, and I don't think there's any getting away from that. And from a Tory point of view, frankly, sometimes you think they don't care about that because of the way they behave. So, as I say, people north of the border will reach their own conclusions on that. And in terms of being an opposition, at the end of the day, that's the way opposition is. You don't get to vote things down because normally the government's got a majority, as they have at the moment. What you do is you work away making obvious points, doing your research, doing your work, being vocal, being visible, and holding the government to account, which is the job of opposition. And as I say, I think the SNP is probably doing a better job of that than Labour at the moment, without a doubt.
It seems that way. So, a second last little question here. In your time down in Westminster, what's the most ridiculously pompous thing you've seen?
Oh, that's a challenging question. They've got this carry-on where, and the tourists love this, and it is great for the tourist point of view, but it's fairly ridiculous. They've got this carry-on whereby at the start of the session every day, the speaker comes in this big procession of folks with funny outfits on, and he carries the mace. He doesn't carry it, somebody else carries it.
I've seen this, yeah.
And they kind of stroll, march down a corridor and march down a different corridor. And somebody shouts, "Hats off," and they've all got to take their hats off. And Berco's always got this inane grin on his face as he strolls round as part of this weird procession. So it's quite incredibly ridiculous, but as I say, as a tourist attraction, it's wonderful. But as part of a modern democracy, it's quite strange. That's one, and I'll squeeze two in because the other one, and this is a great story, the voting in the Parliament obviously isn't done by electronic voting like everybody else in the world does. It's done by this ridiculous thing where they'll march through the lobbies, which takes about 20 minutes for every vote, and quite often at the end of a session they'll have 5 or 6 votes, so it can take more than an hour just to do the voting. At great expense, of course, because they've got staff there all doing all this stuff. And I remember one MP told me they were walking through, and the way the process works at the moment is they walk through and there's 2 folks there on big tellers, on big kind of desks, and they mark your name off as you go through a particular voting lobby. It's all done on paper. And they were asked, have you thought about modern technology? And they said, well, we had a trial to look at iPads. And the MP says, well, that sounds great. You mean everybody would sit in the chamber with an iPad and vote on an iPad and we wouldn't have to go through the lobbies? And he says, no. We still go through the lobbies, but instead of us tellers marking your name off on a piece of paper, we'd tick it off on an iPad.
Oh, Jesus.
So that was the limit of their ambition when it came to moving forward, improving things. And the most ridiculous thing was they had the productivity debate, where they debate about why the UK's productivity isn't improving as fast as it should. And you look at this, and this is just ridiculous. It's the most unproductive waste of time ever going through these ridiculous voting lobbies. So they're a sneak too.
All right. No, the iPad story's brilliant. All right. So when can we find out more about your announcement for standing for MSP?
So there's going through selection processes at the moment, but through the course of the next 4 or 5 weeks, things should be clearer, and they'll be able to let you know what's what at that stage.
All right. Thanks for coming on again, Ivan. That's been great.
Thanks very much, Michael. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
So there you go, that was Ivan. I hope you enjoyed that. I'll be recording another podcast tomorrow, and I've got a couple of guests lined up that I have to conclude recording times with, so there'll be quite a few podcasts coming up soon. This podcast is independently minded and independently funded, and if you'd like to make a little donation, you can do that on my website. It's the last thing on the podcast post. The only other thing apart from that is that after the events with the hunting bill in Westminster, I think this song from Tom Lehrer is the only decent way to finish the show today. Speak to you next time. I always
will remember 'twas a year ago November. I went out to hunt some deer on a morning bright and clear. I went and shot the maximum the game laws would allow. 2 game wardens, 7 hunters, and a cow. I was in no mood to trifle. I took down my trusty rifle and went out to stalk my prey. What a haul I made that day. I tied them to my fender and I drove them home somehow. 2 game wardens, 7 hunters, and a cow. The law was very firm, it took away my permit, the worst punishment I ever endured. It turned out there was a reason, cows were out of season, and one of the hunters wasn't insured. People ask me how I do it, and I say there's nothing to it. You just stand there looking cute, and when something moves, you shoot. And there's 10 stuffed heads in my trophy room right now. 2 game wardens, 7 hunters, and a cow. Yes, the law was very firm. It took away my permit, the worst punishment I ever endured. It turned out there was a reason. Cows were out of season, and one of the hunters wasn't insured. People ask me how I do it, and I say there's nothing to it. You just stand there looking cute, and when something moves, you shoot. And there's 10 stuffed heads in my trophy room right now. 2 game wardens, 7 hunters, and a purebred Guernsey cow.